Hello, welcome to Silverstone, or more specifically the Porsche Silverstone Centre, and behind me is the lineup to make one hell of a day. Today I brought down my Manual GT3, and Porsche Great Britain have given me the keys to a GT3 RS, the Gen 2, and the GT2 RS. Now a few weeks ago I had the honour of borrowing a GT2 RS and driving it through the countryside of Wales. Fantastic experience. The Gen 2 GT3 RS I actually haven't spent much time in. I drove it shortly after the launch in Scotland. It was a short burst, so I didn't really fully appreciate it, and the manual car is my own, and I've just come back from the Nürburgring in it, so I'm pretty familiar with that car. But I thought, wouldn't it be fun to put all three of them back to back, go from the manual GT3 to the PDK GT3 RS, and ultimately the big daddy that is the GT2 RS, back to back on track at Silverstone. No better circuit, particularly for the GT2 RS, which needs a lot of space to stretch its legs. So I'll give you a quick walk and talk around these cars, and then we're going to point you forwards in the seats of each of these cars and debrief afterwards. So here we are. These are our three cars slash toys for the day. And while it's sunny right now, it has been forecast to rain, of course, because it's a Mr. J WW video. So what would it be without some precipitation? Anyway, starting from the right, this is my Crayon manual GT3, 500 horsepower. Moving along to the GT3 RS, this is upgraded to the PDK gearbox. It's 520 horsepower, wider track, increased aero through downforce, larger wing, deeper front splitter, and then on to the big boy GT2 RS, similar track to the GT3 RS, only this is 700 horsepower through the use of turbocharging. This is a Weissach pack. This was wave 1 production of GT3 RS Gen 2, which wasn't available for any Weissach options, so this is a non-Weissach GT3 RS, and my car of the three is probably the lightest configuration, because with manual box versus the PDK, it's lighter from scratch. I also have no roll cage, and we'll see what these are like when you drive them back to back on one of the greatest circuits in the UK. Okay, so here we are, starting at the bottom, so to speak. Never did I think I would be referring to a GT3 as starting at the bottom, but after this we're going to be into the RS, and then we're going to be into the GT2 RS. So, we're coming out now of the pit lane at Silverstone. And there's also, by the way, a lot of actual race cars on circuit, which will no doubt have to change the pace a little bit as we get out of the way for them, effectively. So let's see how we go. So here we are, joining the circuit. I think the things to perhaps note and compare are the outstanding character traits of this car, and then we'll start to talk about how they compare in the other cars. I think the first thing that's probably hitting you guys is the way this thing sounds. Listen to that, all the way up to 9,000 at the end of this straight before braking. 150 miles an hour is where I'm kind of comfortable braking right now in this car while I'm mid-talking to you. That was 150 mile an hour braking zone. Let's see what that's like in the GT2 RS. This is the other thing, of course, it's manual. That's the biggest difference between this car and the other two. Similarities between this and the GT3 RS are, of course, the naturally aspirated engine. But this hasn't quite got the wider track and the big sticky tyres. As chance would have it, I'm actually following a GT3 RS right now. Same generation that I will be driving shortly, but as those stickers would indicate, he has not driven the circuit before, so he's thankfully giving us a little bit of wiggle room. Radical broken down on the inside there. Let's chase this GT3 RS and see what this is all about. So gears, very similar look, in a straight line, very similar. You might hear that slight tyre squeal. We're on brand new tarmac here. They actually had sections of the track resurfaced yesterday, of all times, for a race taking place at the weekend. back there was a sort of gradually tightening right-hander. In this car, you're building speed, and so you're building revs, and at some point halfway through the corner, you're having to dip the clutch and change gear effectively halfway through a corner, which inherently upsets the balance of the car. In the PDK car, you wouldn't have to do that. You would just press a paddle and it would go up, the balance of the car would stay exactly the same. That's where the nuances of the weight balance in the manual change somewhat. But it's such an engaging drive. I'm going to put this out there now and say it's not as fast. Oh look, it's raining. I mean, it wouldn't be one of my videos, would it, if it wasn't absolutely destroying all of the enjoyment. Devastating precipitation. Not cool. I'm also finding, and we'll clarify this in the GT3, but I don't think I can brake quite as hard in this car. The thing is, when you want to heel and tow, you've effectively got half of your foot on the brake pedal and half of it on the accelerator, so you can blip that throttle, matching your engine speed with your transmission speed. Once again, all about weight transfer, not upsettling the car as you're downshifting. I'm feeling that I can't quite brake as deep and as hard in this as I could do if it was PDK. Having said that, I'm super engaged in the moment of driving it. Like when it all comes together and the manual gearbox clicks, and you do execute that perfect heel toe downshift, yeah, you might not be braking as late or as hard as you could do in a PDK car, but the rewards are right up there. But it just feels to me like I'm not as fast. We shall clarify that shortly when we get in the GT3 RS. My biggest interest, however, is the amount of grip and downforce levels, because in terms of power, the engines are very similar from GT3 to GT3 RS. I think there's like 10 brake horsepower more in it, basically hardly anything, and that really is only to account for the extra drag the RS has from the upgraded aero, larger wing, deeper front splitter, etc. So in terms of straight line punch, I mean, you just saw it having a good toe with the GT3 RS in front, very similar, they're basically identical speeds. But it's always under the braking and under cornering where the extra aero, wider track and grip comes into play. So while we're on red flag, effectively, and it's raining a bit, let's fade back to the pits, jump in the GT3 RS. So here we are, car number 2. You know, getting in the 3RS, it just feels right. I'm not sure if it's because it's quite familiar with my GT3, it's just pumped up a notch. It just feels right, you know? I love this wacky interior as well. It makes it feel more special than even the normal, if I dare say it. Alright, conditions are the same, still raining, great. Let's see how we go. Thing sounds berserk. Okay, straight away the front end. It's so direct. It's definitely more pointy and sharp than my GT3, for sure. Sadly, we're getting a little bit of understeer because it's wet. I'm not sure if it's wet enough to take the wet line or stay on the dry line, but I mean, listen, the gear shift as well. I mean, just listen to the gear shift. Okay, straight away on the braking there. That as well, by the way, was very similar speed to the GT3. But under braking, I mean, I'm now left foot braking, and I'm in really deep and heavy on the brakes because I can, because I'm not having to deal with a clutch. Oh God, this is absolutely sublime, this thing. 9,000. Listen to that. There's an racing M4 here. The efficiency and ability to be able to change gear mid-corner is only evident once you've spent time in a manual. When you've spent time in a manual, everything like weight transfer and braking points, everything changes. in the manual, and the front end is a step on. It's just a wider, stickier track. Through here, we're carrying a good, what feels like 4 or 5 miles an hour quicker through there. I think the word that comes to mind with this car, other than awesome, is confidence. There's just more of everything. More grip, more stability, and that's because of more downforce, more braking, because I'm not having to deal with a clutch. And in a straight line, under heavy braking, there's way less squirm. Right, because we're going to jump into the GT2 in a minute, let's see what this does at the end straight. The anchor's pretty heavy at 150 miles an hour, so basically the same as the GT3. It'll be fascinating to see what the GT2 RS does there. Oh, this thing hooks up even in the wet, man. It's that good. Lateral grip as well as. Oh, the front end is definitely a step up, for sure. Thought these words would come out of my mouth, but now let's hop into the GT2 RS. What a day! What a day! Okay, the third and final car. We are in Le Big Daddy GT2 RS, man. This is quite crazy. This is a moment I've been waiting for a long time. If you watch the video where I drove this exact car on the road a few weeks ago, I basically said its operating window was so high that you simply couldn't access it. You couldn't enjoy it on the road. And it was all about the track. Well, here we are, on the track. And what a track it is. Fast, high downforce, make use of that big wing. Oh, straight away you can feel the front end on this. Oh, the torque is ridiculous. I'm feathering the throttle. Off we go, massive surge. Oh, it's absolutely pouring down. I can't believe it. I wonder if we're effectively going to have to drive the wet line now? I don't know, let's see. It's wet, it's properly wet. This will be interesting. I'll tell you shortly how fast we go down this straight compared to the 3 and 3 RS. Are you ready? Shifting in 7. We're already at 140. Woo. Okay, on the brakes, 165 miles an hour. So 15 miles an hour faster than the GT3 and GT3 RS. 15 miles an hour. Same stretch of tarmac. Oh, wow. That's where this thing is different. It's watch this, here's a GT3 RS. Goodbye, he's flat. Like, what a machine. But here's the thing. In terms of braking and turning and anything dynamically, it feels very similar to the GT3 RS. There's the difference. After the apex is the difference. you're effectively short shifting in comparison, 7,000 RPM. And the sound, as I mentioned in the beginning of the GT3 video, God, the speed you're gathering down. I mean, everywhere you can get on the throttle is really where this thing is making up time. It's not in the handling or the braking. It's flat through that though. Flat through there. To 7, you're not thinking I wish this revved more because of the sheer ground you're covering when you reach 7 is just berserk. Yeah, this is all about the throttle action. The balance is very similar to a GT3 RS. When you lift off, there's a full-blown race car. Bye-bye. Once again, 160 miles an hour into the braking zone here. What a thing. There it is, there's that massive torque punch to the face. Boom, on the brakes. You do actually find that you're into the brakes, deeper into the corner. As I mentioned earlier in the 3 and 3 RS, Porsches just inherently love trail braking. But with this car, because you're approaching every corner so much faster, you're deeper and harder on the brakes, sometimes earlier because of the flipping speed you're carrying. Planted. Those short bursts of massive torque are addictive. We're slowly but surely hunting down a GT3 RS up front. Look at this. Relentless pull. That is really what this thing is all about. Effectively, this is a GT3 RS, but it has 200 more horsepower and a lot more torque. And that's the difference, as I mentioned earlier really. It's all about after the apex, between the corners. Massive, flat through here. And the performance is berserk. Over the line. Yeah. Very awesome cars on a very special day. It's the end of the day, so they've kicked us out of Silverstone. So I've decided to do the sort of summary on the drive home. And in the car that we started in. And typically the sun's come out as we've left the track, which is so typical because I would have loved to be able to fully get on it in dry conditions, but it is what it is. So, where do we begin? What an amazing experience. I think first things first, overtake that person. First things first, the differences are actually huge. Now from the outside, I think it's obvious to assume that the biggest difference was going from naturally aspirated to turbocharged from the GT3 and GT3 RS to the GT2 RS. But what's fascinated me the most is the differences between the GT3 and the GT3 RS are much more significant than they would suggest on paper, or even just to look at the cars. I mean, side by side at first glance, they look pretty similar, but it's not until you identify that the fact that the GT3 RS has a wider track, it has wider tyres, more downforce. That was the immediate difference upon turning the first corner in the GT3 RS. Going from this car to that car, the front end is so direct, so planted. Bushings and suspension on that car are derived from motorsport, and you can really feel it. This car despite the fact that I've just come back from the Nürburgring in it, and on that circuit it was incredible because it's more of a, weirdly, the Nürburgring is kind of like a double-laned British B road. It's sort of fast and flowing and undulating, but there's not too many massive braking zones. But when you get onto circuits, like specifically built racing circuits, there's heavy braking zones and they're fast, like they're really fast circuits. And so what I found with this car was just how much its road going ability was highlighted. On the road, for me, this is the more enjoyable car, just because its operating window is more accessible at lower speeds. Yes, it's still very, very fast. I mean, by convention, as a road car, it's ballistic. But because it's manual, you can engage with it at a slower pace, and it still stimulates without you having to wring its neck. Get it on a circuit, Nürburgring aside, and all of a sudden you've got these big, deep braking zones, you've got very fast areas where downforce is more applicable, and all of a sudden this car isn't quite as stable as the GT3 RS. The 3 RS, as I mentioned driving it, the number one word in that car is confidence. Just phenomenal. I felt I could just push much harder, I could brake later. That was massively to do with the fact that it was PDK and not a manual car. You're not as busy with your hands and feet managing all of the components. So on the drive home, I have to say this has been an incredible thing because I'm engaging with it and I love heel and toe, just interacting with the car. But on circuit, the 3 RS, and I guess that's what the RS moniker is all about, really. It's a much more track-focused product. And then we go on to the 2 RS. Now, amazingly, the braking, the turning, the handling, the downforce of the 2 and the 3 RS felt very similar, both incredible. To summarize the GT2 RS, for me, it's everything between the corners. So after the apex and on straights, anything up to the braking areas and between corners is where the 2 RS really takes over. Because it's got such effortless swell of torque that the momentum you find yourself building between corners is ridiculous. Case in point, when we were on the long straight, by the time you're at the same braking zone that you would be in this or the GT3 RS, you are 15 miles an hour faster in the GT2, which means you end up getting on the brakes a bit harder or a bit earlier. Yeah, that car is just all about outright pace and speed. But from driving enjoyment, this might be controversial or surprising and unexpected. For me, of all three cars, it was the GT3 RS. That is the sweet spot, it's the hero car. On the road, perhaps not as engaging as this, and you would have to operate at higher speeds to get the extra performance out of the car. But on the circuit, seriously, it's one of the best cars I have ever driven, and certainly on circuit. And what I'm absolutely dying to do is take a Gen 2 GT3 RS to the Nürburgring and just lap and lap and lap for days. That is my summary, really. That's my takeaway. The car of those cars is the Gen 2 GT3 RS. So there you have it. If you're liking the channel so far, please be sure to subscribe. YouTube are finally sending out a few more alerts these days, so you'll never miss an episode again, because I know some of you have been commenting saying I haven't seen videos lately. That's because YouTube hasn't been sending you alerts. But if you subscribe and tick the bell on the subscription box, that will ensure that you actually get alerts that new content has gone live. Let me know in the comments below what more you would like to see. As always, thank you so much for watching. I shall see you next time. Ciao!